All right, let's dive in. Evolution. Right. Ultimate truth, or is nature just messing with us?
Kind of a big question, huh?
It is. And we've got some pretty interesting voices to help us tackle it. We'll be looking at Darwin, obviously. But also, get this, Socrates, Joe Rogan, Kanye West.
Wait, Kanye, what's he got to do with evolution?
You'll see. And Nietzsche, too, all coming at this idea from totally different angles.
Sounds like a wild mix.
Oh, it is. But don't worry, whether you're like an evolution pro or just curious about how life got so weird, we'll keep things clear and interesting, promise.
All right, I'm in.
So Darwin, this guy, he drops this bomb. Species, they're not just sitting there fixed, they change through like modification and competition.
It's like the whole game changed when he said that. Totally flipped how people saw life.
Right. And he uses this example of, imagine you've got these island colonists, right?
Right.
Arriving on a new island, all new challenges, got to adapt to survive.
Only the ones who fit best, they make it.
Exactly. Survival of the fittest. And he noticed, too, that species in the same area, they often have these similarities.
Common descent, right? Like they share an ancestor way back when, all part of this massive tree of life.
Yeah. So instead of like each species just popping up on its own, it's more like this branching pattern. One species giving rise to others over time. Explains why you get these clusters of similar species in certain places.
Makes sense.
And then there's this whole single versus multiple creation centers thing. Darwin argues species didn't just appear in one spot.
They spread out, migrated, continents shifted, all that.
Right. And you know what he did? To test how plants might travel, like across oceans, he put seeds in seawater for weeks.
No way.
And guess what? A bunch of them actually sprouted.
So plants hopping from island to island, that's wild.
Right. And it's not just plants. Think about birds getting blown across huge distances by storms. Suddenly, long-distance migration doesn't seem so crazy.
Yeah, it makes you realize how connected everything is.
Totally. But here's another thing Darwin noticed about species on mountaintops and islands. He found similar species on peaks miles apart with, like, inhospitable lowlands in between.
Huh, that's weird. Why would they be separated like that?
Right. So Darwin, he comes up with this theory about past climates. Maybe during the Ice Age, when it was colder, they could migrate across those lowlands.
Ah, so they got trapped up there when it warmed up.
Exactly, like little mountaintop arcs. And get this, he uses this example of Japan sharing Arctic plant species with Europe and America.
That's a serious journey.
Right. And it's not just Japan. We see this pattern all over. European species in Australia's mountains, but not in the tropics between. Crazy migrations.
So much we don't realize about how species moved around.
Totally. And speaking of weird distributions, Darwin spent a lot of time looking at islands, right? He noticed that they've got fewer species than continents, but a higher percentage are unique, like found nowhere else.
Endemic species.
Right. Which makes you wonder, if each species was perfectly made for its spot, why are islands kind of understocked?
Good point. Like, why wouldn't there be more of everything on those islands?
Exactly. And Darwin being Darwin, he throws in this funny comment about how humans have accidentally brought more species to islands than nature itself.
Oops.
Yeah, like we're messing with the experiment. But it also shows how important competition is. Darwin uses the Galapagos mockingbirds. Why would a new species succeed on an island that already has a similar one?
Gotta be some serious competition for resources.
Exactly. Even on a seemingly perfect island, there's this constant struggle for survival. Always some new arrival trying to shake things up.
Makes sense.
And this leads us to one of the coolest pieces of evidence for evolution. Rudimentary organs. You know, those useless bits in our bodies.
Like leftovers from our ancestors.
Exactly. They make way more sense if you think about evolution, not like each species being individually created.
Right. Why would you create something useless?
Exactly. Like our tailbone. We don't swing from trees anymore, so why is it still there?
It's like a blueprint with extra parts.
Right. Darwin said these are leftovers from structures that were functional way back when. Like we're carrying echoes of our ancestors inside us.
Kind of humbling when you think about it.
Right. We're not some perfect finished product, just part of this long ongoing process.
Makes you feel connected to everything else that's alive, you know?
Totally. So we've got these echoes of our past. But what about the bigger questions? Like, does evolution have a purpose? Is there some plan?
That's where things get really interesting. Yeah, like Darwin's all about the how, but it opens up this whole can of worms about why.
Totally. And that's where Socrates, Rogan, Kanye, and Nietzsche come in. Each of them looking at this through a different lens.
It's like, okay, we get how it works, but what does it all mean?
Right. So Socrates, this guy, he's got this question, right? If natural selection is all about survival of the fittest, can we base our morality on that?
Tough one. Like, can something that seems brutal and random also be the basis for ethics?
Right? We humans, we like to think we're above all that, but are we really? Are those same drives still playing out just in, like, fancier clothes?
Makes you think. I mean, Socrates, he wasn't saying we should base morality on nature, right? It was more like he was pushing us to think about it.
Exactly. Like, hey, if we're going to say we're moral beings, we better be able to explain how that fits with this whole evolution thing.
Yeah, like reconciling those two ideas.
And then you've got Joe Rogan, who's totally geeking out over Darwin's journey. Like, he's living it with him.
He does get pretty excited about those big scientific discoveries.
Right. It's like, dude, imagine sailing around the world and realizing finches are the key to understanding how life changes. How cool is that?
He's definitely got that infectious enthusiasm.
Totally. But it's cool, right? It reminds us that science isn't just like cold fact. It's this passionate pursuit of knowledge, wanting to understand the world, like, deeply.
Yeah, and sometimes that passion leads to some interesting claims, like Kanye saying his genius proves evolution is all about progress, with him at the top.
Well, he's never been one for modesty. But it does raise a good question, right? Does evolution even have a direction? Are we humans, like, the goal?
We're just another branch on the tree.
Exactly. And then you have Nietzsche, who's looking at Darwin and seeing life as a power struggle. No happy ending where everyone gets a trophy.
More like a constant fight for dominance from the tiniest organism to, like, global superpowers.
Right. So no guarantee that humanity's destined for greatness.
Nope, not according to Nietzsche. Just this endless, striving adaptation competition built into everything.
Kind of a bleak view, but is there some truth to it? Look around, we see competition everywhere.
Definitely makes you think about the darker side of, well, existence and how we fit into that.
Totally. So Darwin, he puts us right in the mix, subject to the same forces as everything else. But we've also got this self-awareness, this capacity for morality, creativity, all that.
So where does that come from? Is it all just, like, fancy adaptations?
Right. Or is it something more, something that sets us apart?
That's where science and philosophy collide, right? Trying to understand the mind and consciousness through the lens of evolution.
It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle with pieces from two different boxes.
Yeah.
Darwin gives us the framework, but then we've got these philosophical questions about meaning, purpose, all that.
Trying to fit them together.
Yeah. And that's what's so exciting. It's not about having all the answers. It's about, like, embracing the mystery.
Yeah.
Letting the questions guide us.
Keep digging, keep exploring.
Exactly. So is evolution the ultimate truth? Or just nature being chaotic? Maybe it's both. This mix of order and randomness, competition, and cooperation.
It's complex, that's for sure.
Totally. And that complexity, that's what makes it so fascinating to study. And before we wrap up this deep dive, we'll take a closer look at how these ideas shape our understanding of ourselves and our place in this vast, ever-changing universe.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're still untangling this whole evolution thing.
Yeah, from Darwin's finches to, like, Nietzsche's power struggles, it's a lot. It is. And before the break, we were talking about whether evolution has a direction, a purpose, or if it's all just, like, change and adaptation.
Right. Like, is there some grand plan?
So let's go back to Darwin for a sec. He's really clear that species, they're not just, like, static things.
They're always changing, shaped by their environment, other organisms, all that.
It's like, imagine a game of musical chairs where the environment keeps changing the rules and moving the chairs.
Makes it tough to stay seated.
Right. And Darwin, he makes this point about migration and isolation. Like, just moving somewhere new or being isolated, that doesn't automatically change a species.
It's about those new relationships, right, with other life, the physical environment. That's what drives adaptation.
It's like if you move to a new city, but you hang out with the same people, do the same things, you're probably not going to change much.
But if you're forced to, like, interact with new people, figure out a new place, deal with new stuff, that's when you really evolve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Darwin talks about how geological stuff like continent shifting, climate change, all that, it can totally mess with migration and where species end up.
He even says, like, a place that's impassable now because of the climate, maybe it was a high road for migration way back when.
So wild to think about. Like, how different the planet was.
Yeah.
And how connected everything is, right? Continents are like puzzle pieces constantly rearranging the evolutionary game.
Creating all these new possibilities for, like, interactions, challenges, new species popping up.
And remember that whole thing about plants traveling across oceans? Seeds surviving in salt water for weeks and then sprouting.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like they've got these built-in survival kits ready to colonize new land.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Totally changes how you think about how life can spread.
Mm.
And Darwin even mentions birds, right? Maybe they're carrying seeds across huge distances without even realizing it.
Nature's own delivery service.
Right. And those weird distribution patterns we talked about, like those mountaintop species.
Yeah.
Darwin uses this example, Japan sharing Arctic plants with Europe and America.
Must have been a time when those migrations were possible, like when it was much colder.
Makes you realize species aren't just stuck in one place. They've been on the move for, like, forever.
Always adapting, trying to survive.
Okay, so, islands. Darwin was obsessed with them. He noticed that, yeah, they have fewer species than continents, but a higher percentage are totally unique, like found nowhere else.
Those endemic species.
Exactly. It's like each island is this little evolutionary experiment.
Yeah.
Just going wild with adaptations.
But then Darwin points out this weird thing. If every species was made for its specific spot, why are islands so understocked?
Like, nature started the project but didn't finish it.
Right.
And of course, Darwin, being Darwin, he's got this funny comment about how humans have accidentally brought more species to islands than nature itself.
Like we're messing with the natural order.
Totally. But it also shows how important competition is. Darwin uses the Galapagos mockingbirds, remember? Like, why would a new species be successful on an island that already has a similar one?
Got to be some serious competition for resources going on there.
Right. So even in these seemingly like perfect isolated places, life is still a battle.
Always pushing, adapting, trying to carve out a space.
That's what's so amazing about all of this, right? This
Ah.
constant dance of life. Adaptation, competition, the environment always changing. And we're just starting to understand how complex it
Yeah,
really
that's
is.
kind of mind-blowing.
Totally. So as we wrap up this deep dive, just remember, it's not about having all the answers.
More about like staying curious, asking questions, letting all of this inspire your own exploration.
Yeah, whether you're geeking out on natural selection or like pondering the meaning of it all, remember that the journey, the thinking about it, that's where the real magic is. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and thanks for joining us on this wild ride through evolution.